Good evening, everybody, and thank you for joining this webinar this evening, which we're here to talk about the Lido in Newbury. So thank you all for joining us. Really, the aim of today is to provide an opportunity to hear about our plans for the Lido and an opportunity for the public to ask questions. In particular, we like to understand how people use the Lido, their views on the proposals for the facilities, the size of the pool, and also any suggestions you might feel could make it better. My name is Matt Pearce. I'm the Service Director for Communities and Wellbeing here at West Berkshire Council. Before we go any further, I'd just like to take an opportunity for the panel to introduce themselves, and then I'll give a bit of an overview in terms of how we're going to take the webinar forward. So Paul Martindale, would you like to just introduce yourself?
Yeah, hello. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Paul Martindale. I'm an interim consultant working with West Berkshire Council, and I've been working very closely with the leisure team to look at the options for the Lido development.
Thank you, Paul. And Jim Sweeting. Just on mute there, Jim.
I had to start that way, didn't I? Sorry, Matt. It's Jim Sweeting, Sport and Leisure Manager at West Berkshire Council. Overseeing the leisure contract and some of the proposed developments going forward.
Thanks, Jim. And Councillor Woodiston.
Howard Woodiston, good afternoon. I'm ward member for Lambourne. I sit on the council's executive with a portfolio which includes leisure and culture.
Great, thank you. Firstly, we're really excited to be here. We think this is a great opportunity. We're all really excited at the council to really think about how these proposals can go forward. Many of you watching will be aware that we've got a live consultation out at this moment, and to date we've had over 500 responses to that consultation. So it really does show how important this facility is to the residents of West Berkshire. Clearly, we'd like to increase those numbers more. So one of my asks early on will be to encourage as many people as you can to take part in that consultation. That would be really helpful. For those that are actually joining the webinar live this evening, we do have a number of pre-submitted questions which we will go through later, but there's also an opportunity for you to ask questions via the Q&A function. So please do pop any questions throughout this webinar, and I'll try to get through as many as we can. We have an hour. We might not need to use all that time, but we do have that within our gifts. So before I go forward, I'm just going to ask Paul just to give a very quick summary in terms of what our proposals are, and then hopefully that will help people in terms of what questions they might ask going forward. So Paul, over to you.
Okay. Right, well, hopefully you can all see the PowerPoint presentation in front. I've got 10 slides to share with you. So effectively, this will give you an overview of the proposals that we've come forward with. These are indicative proposals. They're not cast in stone. They're designed to stimulate your thinking, and they'll be complementary to the survey that you'll be undertaking if you choose to participate.
So Paul, can I just stop you there? Sorry, we can't quite see your slides yet.
Okay, I'm not quite sure why they're not up. Right, they're up on my screen, Matt, but I'm not quite sure why they're not showing.
Okay, just need to click the share screen option, Paul, or others, if colleagues on the call could possibly share them.
They just love technology.
There we go. Okay, we have these slides up now, Paul. So I'm not sure if that's you or one of our colleagues, but you're free to go.
Okay, thank you. Right, so next slide, please, whoever's controlling. Thank you. So the Lido, as you can see, has actually been part of the landscape for West Berkshire Council for 150 years. It's located at an historic watering hole, and effectively it was a bathing pool that was built in the 1870s, and it's been remodeled over time. Next slide, please. It's fed by a borehole, and the water is abstracted under license from the Environment Agency, and that limits the amount of water that can be taken in each year. As you all know, water is a precious resource, and so the licensing agency has a role in basically monitoring the water that we use for the Lido. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so what we're about to show you now is 3 options for the Lido development. The first option is showing that the Lido length is converted from its current length of 71 metres to a 50-metre pool. It also then has additional options that are around it. So what we're showing in this option is basically a way of making it a more family-orientated facility. You'll see that basically to the bottom of this slide, there is a feature which is actually a set of fun slides. Just up to the top left-hand corner, there is an interactive splash pad, which is a facility aimed at young children. And to the right, in the sort of brown patch there, is a climbing facility called Clip and Climb. The next slides will show this in a bit more detail. Next slide, please. So this is the interactive splash pad. It's really designed for young children. It can accommodate sort of up to 60 kids or more. And really, it's a sort of fun facility designed to enable young children to be active. It doesn't require you to be a swimmer, but you can enjoy still, a water experience by playing with numerous facilities that are covered by the splash pad itself. Next slide, please. The racing slide, basically, this is a slide that can accommodate up to 4 people. It's just a fun slide and potentially a fun addition to the scope of facilities that we're able to offer. Next slide, please. And high ropes, basically this is a sort of a challenging activity that will help boost confidence and strength and endurance for young people. It's essentially a climbing experience, which we think can add to the overall experience of visiting the Lido. Next slide, please. So that was option 1, and that option 1 was very much about the presentation of a 50-metre Lido with a number of special features. On this one, we are again presenting a 50-metre Lido option, but at the top of that area there, you'll see this has the addition of a toddler pool. So that is the sort of, a key addition here. It still retains the clip and climbing, and it still retains the interactive splash pad to the corner on the left. Next option, please. And finally, this option actually retains the Lido in its current format, so 71 metres in length. It does limit the scope then to have further interactive features. It can accommodate a children's interactive play area, but just that. So effectively, the key with this option is trying to assess whether or not the community's preference is to retain the length of the Lido or to have, with the other options, more interactive features. Next slide, please. So just to summarise, the consultation survey opened on July the 26th and it closes on the September the 5th. The survey can be found there on the link that's there, and the results of the survey will be published in the autumn of 2021, and the consultations and responses will go on to inform the recommendations and proposals for the council to consider. Next slide, please. And really just to say that the survey itself is about exploring much more than just the Lido options, those 3 options. We want your opinion on the way that the Lido should be programmed, the facilities that are available. So you'll see sort of other options that exist there in relation to the sort of catering and changing rooms that are based around the poolside. We also are seeking your views on the duration of the length of time the Lido should be opened each year. It's currently open for 10 weeks, and we want to explore if there is demand for that to be open for a longer period. And we also sort of want your views on the catering options, whether or not that's an important part of the offer going forward, whether or not you just prefer to sort of bring your own food, etc. So, we encourage you to go into the survey and have a look at those options. And within those survey options, you'll find there's also opportunities for you to put forward your own views about the kind of facilities that should be included. And I think that's it. Thank you.
Thanks for that, Paul. That's really helpful, and I think really sets the context in terms of what this webinar is all about. Just to emphasise, it is really important we get the views of as many people as possible. We want this facility to represent those needs in our community. So what I'll do now is I'll go through a series of our pre-submitted questions. I'm starting to see a few questions coming in live. I'll go through those in the first instance, and I'll ask each of the panel, depending on the question, to respond. So the first question comes from Natalie Ivy, and she asks, I would like to see this open for longer, maybe just after Easter or May bank holiday. It often opens so late we miss the opportunity of the good weather. It would be great to have more food kiosks, barbecue kitchens, sun lounges, and more picnic tables. She has some other questions, but I'll probably pose that first one to you, Councillor Wollaston, if that's okay.
Thank you, Matt. This is exactly what started off the discussions that we had over the Lido. Clearly, being open for 2 months a year is not really a good use of a large and popular facility. It's been conditioned that way because of the structure of the pool, or the current pool. And that's why the first phase of what we were planning to do is to effectively strengthen it, and underpin is the wrong word, but support it more properly. The ambition is to see if we can have the Lido open from Easter through to the end of September. And our current thoughts are that this should be achievable. We are proposing a refreshment area or cafe with picnic tables, and there are also sun lounges, which I think was also one of your questions.
Okay, thank you. So she also had a follow-up question where she said, I also think priority booking should be given to West Berks residents, as often there are long queues. I do like the booking system this year that allows you to book ahead, meaning that you know you'll not be left in a queue only to find out that it's full when you get to the front.
Local authority leisure facilities are open to all, regardless of residents. However, we may look at the idea of a pricing structure whereby non-residents of West Berkshire have to pay more, which may be a solution. The current pre-booker option is probably going to stay. It's been proved to be a success. It's eased queues and help with attendance. Obviously, members of Northcroft Leisure Centre can pre-book the Lido slots 1 week in advance, and non-members 5 days in advance.
Thanks, Councillor Wollaston. And then finally, she just states, I think, support for slides and a large splash area for youngsters, but she doesn't think too fondly in terms of the one in Victoria Park.
Well, as you've seen from the selling of option 1, that's exactly what we're thinking of.
Great, thank you. Okay, so moving on to another question. This time we received from Tom, and his question is, have you evaluated other such Lidos like the Bristol Lido? The additional offerings there bring associated revenue streams through food and drink and massage, etc. These bring not only additional jobs, but also the much needed revenue outside of non-optimum weather conditions, which would help maintain the facilities and not see them fall behind in upkeep, as has previously happened over the years. Paul, would you like to answer that one?
Yeah, thank you, Matt. Yeah, we have looked at Bristol Lido. In fact, in the last 2 weeks, I visited that particular Lido myself, and you're right, it's an attractive facility. And it's based really on its catering offer, which complements the Lido, where they have a sort of tapas service, etc. And it's also based on the provision of sort of, alternative therapies and massage. I think the model works really because of the sort of high pricing structure that goes along with it. The cost of membership there is in the region of £1,000 a year. And the sort of non-member rate, if you can get in, and it's not easy to get in, is really £20 a booking. So I think the model that we're looking at and the options that we've shown you are not really about exclusivity, but inclusivity. We're really trying to include it as a sort of family scheme by some of the options that we've shown. So there is a sort of toddler pool and the slides, etc. And the sort of Bristol Lido, whilst it is commercially successful, doesn't have any of those additional offers. Obviously, it's a much smaller facility as well. It's only 24 metres in length. So we're sort of mindful really of sort of the scope and scale of this facility in comparison to Bristol Lido. and we've tried to sort of bring in a lot of additional features which aren't part of the Bristol Lido offer. That's it.
Okay, thanks, Paul. Okay, so the next question is from John Moore, and he asks, first he states, first, I'm delighted that the council is actively considering plans to fund, upgrade and increase use of the Lido. I am a Northcroft member, regular user and committed outdoor swimmer. His question is, would the council consider every possible way to maintain the length of the Lido? 70 plus metres is its unique selling proposition. There are other water parks, but nowhere to my knowledge has such a long pool. I also see we've received a live question to the same nature as well. Jim, would you like to respond to that one?
Thanks, Matt. Yeah, I mean, we obviously agree about the 70 metres plus being a USP for the pool currently, but the position we're in at the moment in terms of trying to rectify the situation that Councillor Wollaston explained in relation to opening earlier in the year allows us the opportunity to explore with the community the various options that might be available to us and to get feedback on what is the most popular within the community. But the 70 metre plus remains an option on the table. No one has taken that away.
Okay, thanks for that, Jim. And there's a follow-up question from John that says, will the council consider maintaining the swim lane where possible? Swimming will be even more popular in the UK following Olympic success. And a quick plug to congratulate all our Olympic swimmers, because they've done a fantastic job. But I'll let you reply to that one, Jim.
Yeah, obviously we saw the Olympic bounce after 2012 and 2016, and the data shows that swimming became very popular again for the year or so afterwards. We see no reason for getting rid of the lane swimming. The potential is within the plans that we're looking at, and the feedback we're looking for from the community is to look at how we program the pool. So it isn't just whenever it's open, just a time when people can laze around and swim, but there are various options available for people to book onto.
Okay, thanks, Jim. And a slightly similar question to what Councillor Wollaston answered was, would the council consider extending the open season of the Lido even all year? Well marketed, this could attract many outdoor swimmers in what is a huge and growing activity. The heating could be moderated in the colder months or turned off, as outdoor swimmers are hardy and often wear wetsuits. This would provide a continued revenue source year round. Hampton Court Lido is a good example of this. So not sure the association with hardy swimmers, I'm sure there's many people might contest that, but Jim, do you have a response to that?
Yes, Matt. As someone who in their younger days has traditionally done the Boxing Day swim off the Northumberland coast in the North Sea, I can verify you don't need a wetsuit to be hardy. You can be foolish and go forward. Councillor Wollaston explained what our target position is in trying to get an extended season from April to September. But again, all options remain on the table as we discuss forward. So if the demand is present, we can explore extending that season further.
Okay, thanks, Jim. And a slightly related question from John. We also asked, will the council consider extending the opening hours, especially at weekends? Swimmers enjoy early mornings all week, outdoor evening swimming, outdoor twilight swimming, etc. could be a selling proposition.
Again, it comes back to how the pool is programmed. We're in the process of going through the mechanisms for a new contract. The contract is due for renewal, and it will be within our remit of the discussions with any new operator, whether Legacy Leisure or another operator, to discuss how they program that pool for the maximum usage.
Okay, thanks, Jim. So it is very clear that I think there's lots of flexibility in those options going forward, and obviously it would depend on demand in terms of whatever proposal is taken forward. I'm monitoring the live chat as well. So the next question is around budget and finance. So this one comes from Rachel Tree. And the question is, how much is the estimated cost of the redevelopment, and how are you going to convince the taxpayer of the benefits of this redevelopment to West Berkshire? And I think I've also had a live question on that nature, so I'll probably put that one to you if that's okay, Councillor Wollaston.
Yes, thank you, Matt. First thing to say is that doing nothing is not an option. As I said earlier, just having it open for 2 months of the year is unacceptable to my view. In terms of costs, we have submitted an application to the Levelling Up Fund for £4 million to see whether we can get a government grant to pay for this. We've done some very initial costings, and that seems to be about the rate. Is by coincidence, I think, what the Bristol Lido cost as well. If that application doesn't work, the council is able to borrow money from government through what's called the Public Works Loan Board at a very low fixed interest rate over up to a 50-year period. Clearly, that money has to be repaid over the 50 years as well. But the difference is that the Lido will be an income-producing facility. So particularly if you add in the effects of inflation over the 50-year period, it should be self-financing, and there should be no great imposition on the local council taxpayer.
Okay, thank you for that, Councillor Wollaston. So we have another question from Jack Kane. And he asked, the consultation page mentions providing a long-term future for the Lido. I appreciate how the depth of the pool could make it difficult and expensive to maintain. However, it is not clear from the information provided how substantially reducing the length of the pool to accommodate water slides and high ropes help secure the long-term future of the pool for those who love to use it for swimming. Paul, can I ask you to respond to that?
Yes, thank you, Matt. Yeah, the options about converting the Lido to 50 metres are not sort of key to the sort of maintaining the life of the Lido long term. They're more a reflection of the fact that many people enjoy swimming over a sort of an Olympic pool length. So what we wanted to do was ensure that people had an option around whether or not they would like a 50-metre pool length for training in, etc., or the 71-metre length. The issue around keeping the Lido and ensuring its survival is all about the depth of the pool, and we do have to reduce the depth of the pool from its current 2.8 metres to 1.5 metres in order to take the pressure off the pool tank and the surrounding bases, which is basically where the critical issues are lying. So what we're doing is we're presenting, as I think Jim said earlier, options for both 50 metres and to retain a 71-metre length. It can't be 72-metre length simply because some of the filtration work that we'll have to undertake would reduce it by 1 metre. So I think that's the first part covered, Matt.
Okay, thanks for that, Paul. And Jack had a follow-up question. Is there a risk that we permanently reduce the length of a historic pool to accommodate activities which themselves require costly maintenance? Has any work been done to establish the impact on the pool's revenue of these facilities?
Yeah, okay.
Paul again, sorry.
Thank you. Yeah, basically, we are looking at the revenue options in relation to these, and we're aware that additional features require additional staffing, etc. But most importantly of all, I think we're driven by trying to ensure these facilities are attractive to everybody and that they've got wide appeal. We will be sort of doing a new leisure management contract in the future, in the not too distant future, and so the facilities themselves will be subject to a procurement exercise and tendering to ensure that the council can get best value for money from its future operations. So yeah, it's essentially, we're conscious that we're trying to get a balance right of having a really well-used facility and ensuring that that is sort of done at the most cost-effective price possible.
Okay, thanks, Paul. And he did have a couple more follow-up questions. One being, all proposals would seem to be substantially reducing the amount of green space around the pool. Can we hear more about the potential justification for this? Okay.
There is, I think, if you look at those options in the surveys, there is still a substantial amount of green space that's retained in each of those options. Certainly, there'll be relaxation areas. There's a cafeteria with a seating area next to it. The existing toddler pool will no longer be in its current position. and that area will be returned to open space as per all proposals. So we're certainly conscious that having sufficient space is important, and that's really why we've presented in the survey a series of options so that you can choose which of those additional facilities that you would enjoy, or actually opt for none of them. And so there's a sort of, you know, the minimal option of the 71 metre length with just one additional feature. So we're certainly not trying to sort of cram everything in. All of the layouts have, you know, sufficient open space for people to enjoy, but we're here to listen to the sort of preferred options of the community and go forward on that basis.
Thanks, Paul. And one final question from Jack. I will come to our live questions in a minute. We're nearly there with our pre-submitted questions to those patiently waiting. Was what engagement was done ahead of these options being drawn up? Paul, sorry to you.
Okay, yeah, thank you. Essentially, this is our sort of most robust and extensive consultation exercise. Prior to this piece of work, we consulted with an organisation called Space and Play, who helped us design these facilities. And really our consultation has been really on a very technical nature so that we can establish what's required and what the possibilities are for the Lido going forward. So, you know, this is our primary opportunity to sort of listen to the public and to get your views.
Okay, thank you, Paul. And then the final pre-submitted question comes from Mel Parsons, and she's asked, I've spent most of my life at Northcroft. I would be devastated if the pool went, as it is part of Newbury's history. I agree it needs a lot of work and updating, so please can you confirm that it is staying? I mean, that's certainly my understanding, Mel, but Councillor Williston, would you just like to confirm that?
The simple answer is yes, as long as there's continued demand for the Lido. We want to retain this unique facility for future generations, but bring it up to date to the 21st century. The only caveat I would add to that is to achieve Easter 2023 full opening on any of the three options, we are probably not going to be able to open the Lido in 2022.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Williston. So we're now going to move on to the live questions that are being submitted. So I'll try and pick these out. There are a few common themes coming out, Paul, and I'm probably going to ask you to answer this question. And it's very much that, are the options fixed, and is there flexibility in further variation? In, you know, is there an option 4 and option 5? So one of them is, do we leave the pools as they currently are but improve them and the supporting facilities like cafe and changing? Or another option could be around a toddler pool, 50-metre Lido, splash pad, but minus the high ropes, as high ropes seem a bit out of place in a wet, slippery environment. So I guess, yeah, what is that level of flexibility going forward?
Okay, thanks, Matt. Yeah, the level of flexibility is extremely wide. The proposals that we're putting forward are indicative, and really it's to find out from you, you know, which of these options are the preferred options, which of these individual sort of water features are liked and disliked. And we're not really pushing in any particular direction. We're sort of seeking your input as to sort of, you know, the scale and variety of features that are there. So yeah, I mean, the short answer to this question is everything is on the table. We can have a sort of quite a minimalist development, or we can have something that is, you know, covering all of the features that are in there. And certainly, you know, the cafeteria service is included within the proposals, a cafeteria that would service both outside the leisure centre and inside the leisure centre, with seated area and relaxation facilities. And throughout the survey, when you look at it, you know, you'll see that we're really trying to explore in depth a wide range of options. So really all options on the table and nothing definitive and nothing limited at this stage.
Okay, thanks, Paul. Can you just confirm that there is a free text option within the survey, so that if people do have additional ideas, that they can actually include their views as part of that? Am I right in saying that?
Yes, Matt. That's correct. So basically, we have listed a number of different options there, but we've also asked for the community to put forward specific proposals. So if there's ideas that we've missed, if there are features that they'd like to see, then there's certainly an opportunity to propose those.
Okay, thanks for that, Paul. Okay, next one for you, Jim. I think this is from Rachel Peters. Will there be any option to have a swim-only membership for Lido, and also post-COVID for all-day booking?
There is currently a swim-only option of membership at Northcroft. Also, children on the Learn to Swim programs also get free admission, both to the Lido and indoor pools. So that option is there. In terms of the booking and all-day option, that will come down to whether or not the program changes, and depending on the responses we get from the community, whether there are added elements in the program instead of just the sunbathe and swim option which is there currently.
Okay, thank you. And the next question is from Jack Kane. It's just a long question. I'll probably pose this one to you, Paul, if that's okay. You mentioned that one of the intentions with proposals 1 and 2 is to make the pool more family orientated. Speaking as someone who uses the pool regularly, the pool often appears full of families enjoying themselves in fair weather. Have families requested facilities of the kind being proposed in proposals 1 or 2? And do you know what that families would use these facilities in cooler weather?
Thanks for that question, Jack. I mean, you're right. Generally speaking, in good weather, Lidos in themselves are very attractive facilities for families. We've just, looked at the market and the options that are available and the kind of facilities that, young people with young families find attractive. And these are attractive water facilities, but we're not trying to sort of push them onto the community and say these are must-haves. We're conscious that they've been implemented in other areas across the country. They've been very well received across the country. And all we're really doing is presenting these options for local families to decide whether or not this should be included within the overall development scheme, or whether or not, they're just not needed. And the more simplistic option, with just a sort of Lido and maybe one other feature is there. So yeah, that's the sort of balance. We haven't actually tried to, advocate anything specific. We've just picked up on what we know has been popular elsewhere.
Okay, thanks, Paul. One for you, Councillor Williston. Will the entries from Nikki Mena will the entry fee increase? If so, by how much?
Oh, thanks for giving me that one. I would imagine it will increase slightly, but not by a significant amount. I mean, clearly it does go up by inflation most years anyway. But as I said in one of my earlier answers, this ought to be a pretty self-financing development, for want of a better phrase. So there should be no real need to increase the costs of entry.
Okay, thanks. Jim, did you want to add anything more around that in terms of pricing from the leisure experience?
Yeah, at the moment, each year from our contractor, we get proposals for price increases that we take through to members, and we do a benchmarking exercise. And that benchmarking would tend to suggest that for supervised Lidos, we are at the cheaper end of the price range that's out there at the moment. So, there's no intention at this stage to be looking at anything different to that.
Okay, thanks, Jim. And just a note from Solera and Antoniette, I think I pronounced that right, is hi, thanks for this webinar. I agree about keeping the Lido accessible to all, including the pricing. Kings Meadow Lido is nice, but its reliance on a restaurant spa atmosphere makes it expensive for a lot of people. Please can we ensure the pricing keeps it accessible to families and people on low income? So I don't think we need a response to that. I think we've covered that, but thank you for the question. One from Elizabeth Whitehead Davis. She says, is it too expensive to heat the pool? London Fields is a better example of what could be done. Paul, shall I go to you for that one?
Heat in the pool will be an option that we can look at. Generally speaking, where Lidos are heated, there is an increase in price, but the benefit to that is that it makes swimming all year round a more attractive option. So it's certainly an option that we could look at, Matt, and I think that's as much as I'd say at the moment.
Is it worth adding in, Paul, that this is meant to be an environmentally friendly development as well? So if we do go down the heating route, it will be ground source heating, solar panels on changing rooms and such like. Okay,
thanks, Councillor Wilson and Paul. There's just another Kay Baker just supportive in terms of keeping the 70-metre pool that will enable adults to swim in the evening and out of season. The next question from Stephen Holloway. He asks, maximum usage of pool requires depth to be constant along length, otherwise pool is not fully utilised, particularly by youngsters. So I guess that's probably an observation more than a question. So I'm just trying to read these at the same time. So this is an observation from Nikki Murno. She says, also delighted that the Lido is getting attention. Why the loss of the shallow paddling pool in 2 of 3 options? Splash pads can be rather overwhelming for some children, and the shallow pool is used by non-swimming adults for gentle relaxation, as well as very young children with parents, and small children can be immersed. They tend to get quite cold very quickly at splash pads, even in hot weather. So play value is short. I mean, I guess that's really why we're consulting. But I don't know, Paul, if you wanted to add any more to that comment.
Well, all I can say, Matt, is the structural damage to the existing toddler pool does mean that it's no longer viable for future use. You know, that's one of the things that's been established through the sort of technical surveys that we've done. And so, you know, we want to sort of get the public's view on whether or not having another toddler pool, which we've included in one of the options, is something that is popular. And if that turns out to be, you know, one of the most popular options, it could certainly be retained.
Thanks, Paul. Okay, interesting question from Elizabeth Whitehead Davis. She goes, would you consider floodlighting for morning and evening swimmers? Who wants to take that question? Jim, do you want to have a go at tackling that one?
Thank you, Matt. I mean, the bottom answer is yes, we would consider it. There are obviously a couple of main issues in the Northcroft area. One is there are houses immediately next to the Lido area, so that they would have to be taken into consideration. There is also an issue with bats in the area, and we know from a Never project which was shelved, not to do with the Lido, that floodlighting in that area wouldn't have been possible September, October, and into the mid-autumn period.
Okay, thanks, Jim. That was really helpful. Okay, so the next question is from Julia Calvert, and she says, will the depth of the pool be staying the same, having grown up going to this pool as a teenager? Being able to jump and flip in the end was a highlight. Newbury doesn't have a lot for teenagers, and this is where we spent a lot of time over summer. Would you be adding for that? What would you be adding for that age range, Paul?
Okay. The depth of the existing pool is one of the things that unfortunately we do have to change, the maximum depth. So basically the fact that the pool goes down to a depth of 2.8 meters means obviously there's high volume of water in there. And that is a contributing factor. The pressure of that water has been a contributing factor to the damage to the expansion joints of the tank and the base. So the only way that we can preserve the future of the Lido is to reduce the depth from its current level of 2.8. There can still be a depth of 1.5 meters and an option to retain that depth all the way along the length of the pool, or to have a sort of more graduated profile going from 0.9 meters in the shallow end down to 1.5. And 1.5 meters is certainly sufficient for diving. So, you know, that the fun of diving wouldn't be lost. But unfortunately, the one thing we cannot do in order to keep the Lido is to retain the depth of 2.8 meters, because the structure and the bases just won't stand for that kind of pressure.
Thanks for that, Paul. I have an interesting question from Rachel Peters, and she asked, would you consider crowdfunding? As I know of many local people who would support a project to see the Lido open for longer. Do I have any of the panelists wishing to answer that one? I mean, my personal view is I think we can always consider that. We'd have to weigh up the pros and cons in terms of the timeline that we're working to. I don't know if any of the panelists have an additional viewpoint from that.
I'll take that if you like. I have been approached on this by other people as well. And my initial conclusion was that the amount of money involved probably means that crowdfunding just couldn't get there. Whether it could contribute to certain areas of it is another issue. And perhaps if we could use crowdfunding to either produce the toddler pool as an example.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Wollaston. So that's certainly something we can take away and consider that viewpoint for sure. Nikki Minnow just supports the 70 while keeping the long length of the pool. We've had a couple of questions in from people actually asking about the high ropes. So I'll probably look to you for this one on Paul. Is how do children safely use high ropes? Are young children able to access it? What are the age ranges, particularly those with special needs? Is there a need to be fitted into a harness? If so, will well-trained staff be needed? So there's a couple of questions coming in around that. Are you able to tackle those at all?
Yeah, I can certainly tackle some of them. Yeah, I mean, there will be a supervised area, and clip and climb generally is part of any climbing facility. You know, in case a young child falls off, essentially we don't want them crashing to the ground and hurting themselves. And you know, a lot of the time these facilities are accessible. We would sort of look at the specifics of the detailed design for the facility going forward. I guess the kind of key aspect is whether or not people feel this kind of climbing facility fits in with the Lido environment, whether or not it's something that people would want to see there. So, the short answer is it is accessible. It will be available for young people. And certainly, climbing facilities have got very stringent health and safety rules, and it would be staffed closely.
Okay, thanks, Paul. And a couple of questions related to that from Kay Baker. Apologies, I can't see your first name. And she asked, could the climbing ropes not go out where the zip wire is? And another option is, could there be a smaller splash pad that runs off into the toddler pool? Paul, sorry, probably to you again.
As I said, okay. I think all of those options are viable. And please do go ahead and put those kind of comments into the surveys. The scale of splash pads, there are options around that. The scale of climbing facilities, there are options around that as well. So, if there are comments in relation to scale, please use the sort of boxes in the surveys to complete those, and then we can sort of, consider what's been said further in our design and scaling of the facilities. Okay,
thanks. And I've worked out that the K is Karen. So thank you for letting us know, Karen, who the mystery person was. Right, I've got an observation from Stephen. So clearly this is a bit of a contentious one, is that he's quite keen on supporting the 71 metre length, and that can be quite discouraging for swimmers and can be quite daunting. A question from Rachel Peters. She says, I love the Lido, having been visiting since I was a child and now taking my own children. It is great in its simplicity. All we need is a picnic, pop-up tent and inflatables, and that's a day out for the family. I'd love to see it improved, but don't feel the need to add the other extras that distracts from what people go there to do. So again, thanks for that, Rachel, and obviously we'd welcome your views in terms of that consultation, and we can feed that in. We have one final question. So if any others do wish to submit a question, please do. We still have a few minutes left. And this is from Nikki, and she asked, so Lido cafeteria to be able to also service people visiting Goldwell Park would also be very welcome. Jim, did you want to tackle that question?
Again, it's an option we would be more than happy to consider within the overall proposals, and welcome it.
Okay, thanks, Jim. So that is all the questions, both pre-submitted and live. I don't see any additional live questions coming in. I will maybe just go around the panel if they have any other thoughts or remarks or observations, just to give people an opportunity to ask any further questions. And then if we don't get any further questions coming in, we'll draw the session to a close. So Paul, is there anything you wish to add, observations or feedback?
No, I think the observations have been really interesting, looking at what's come through, and quite a blend really of sort of people wanting both the traditional and the modern, and I think that's going to be sort of a challenge for us to sort of adjudicate the information. But there's clearly demand for both, and that's one of the observations that I've seen coming through the Q&A.
Okay, thanks for that. Jim, any thoughts, reflections from you?
Just as someone who's been involved with the centre and obviously the Lido for the best part of 32 years, to actually have be in the position now where we're actually talking about its future and trying to secure its future is very positive. And obviously we don't want to impose on the community. We want the community to tell us what is best. Within that, there will be some people who will be disappointed because a larger part of that community will have requested something, and potentially the majority might win out.
Yeah, thanks, Jim. And that's a really good point. It's always difficult to please somebody, but as a local authority, and I'm sure executive would try and make every effort to come up with the solution that most people would want. Councillor Wollaston, is there anything you'd like to finish on?
It just seems to me we're looking at two separate audiences. First one is the really keen all-year swimmers, and the second one probably is the families, particularly younger children. And I think we probably need to find a way to split the timing, so perhaps there's more sessions in the morning and early morning and late evening for the keen swimmers, and we keep perhaps the centre of the day perhaps more for families. It's just a thought.
Okay, thank you. We've just had one last minute question come in from Nikki. So she says, we have often enjoyed the mini golf when small children get cold. Maybe that can be considered. Lots of fun in cooler, even wet weather. Great to be able to hear the basis of proposals and to let you know what we enjoy. Thank you. So that's really kind of you to thank you, Nikki. Again, I think we can add those contributions certainly to the consultation. Another one coming in from John Howell, and he says, many Lidos in Switzerland have concrete table tennis tables. Have you considered this? Paul, I suspect it's probably the same answer. I'm not sure we have considered that option, but again, we can consider that and see whether that would be appropriate within some of our proposals. Paul, is there anything to add?
No, I mean, that's a really interesting suggestion, and you're right. I've seen, the increasing popularity of those kind of features, in public spaces. And if that kind of activity is popular, please put it into the survey, is what I would say. The more of those specific references that come through the survey, the greater the probability that we've got evidence to go with that option. So thank you for that suggestion. Something we hadn't thought of, but actually, I could see something like that going down very well in the Lido environment.
You're mute, Matt.
Through the whole session without doing that, so a bit disappointed. But sorry, got a couple of observations just coming in from Karen. She says we must keep our Lido, and David Tifield, who says we're not like member swimmers unable to get lane swimming during the day. So again, it's just something for us to feed into the consultation. And then Karen, a final point is we seem to need to use Goldwell Park for some activities and leave the Lido to wet play. So I think we're probably drying up with our questions there. So I think it's all for me just to really thank everybody for tuning in and watching. I hope it's been useful and informative. Thank you for those asking the questions. It certainly gives us lots to think about. I think finally, before we go, obviously just to thank the panelists for their contributions, and just to remind everybody to take part in that consultation, which closes on the 5th of September. So do share amongst your friends and family, and obviously the local authority will decide the next steps in terms of all that feedback and how we progress and what those options look like. So thank you all very much, and I'll see you all soon. Good night.
Bye.